The silence in the boardroom on the 40th floor of the Plaza District was deafening, broken only by the sharp, mocking bark of Patton Van Doren's laughter. He looked across the mahogany table at his wife of 4 years, a quiet woman in a faded grey cardigan, and shook his head in disbelief. "You want nothing?" he sneered, checking his Rolex. "Darling, without me, you are nothing." He turned to his attorney, expecting a shared look of amusement. But the lawyer wasn't smiling. The senior partner was staring at the divorce papers, his hands trembling visibly, his face drained of all color. He looked up, terror in his eyes, and whispered, "Mr. Van Doren, stop talking. You need to read the name she just signed." The conference room at Pendleton, O'Malley and Associates smelled of lemon polish and aggressive capitalism. It was a corner office in Manhattan, the kind of room designed to intimidate anyone who didn't have a 7-figure trust fund. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, currently dusted in the grey slush of a bleak February afternoon. Patton Van Doren stood by the window, his back to the room. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit, catching his reflection in the glass. He liked what he saw. At 34, Patton was the golden boy of New York real estate, or at least that was what Forbes had printed last month. He had the jawline, the pedigree, and the ruthlessness required to survive in the city. He checked his phone. A text from Chantel popped up. "Is the witch gone yet? Champagne is getting warm." Patton suppressed a smirk. He typed back, "Almost. She's playing the martyr. Be there in 20. He turned around, his face composing itself into a mask of bored impatience. Sitting at the far end of the massive table was Sherry. She looked agonizingly out of place, amidst the leather chairs and oil paintings. She wore a simple charcoal cardigan that had seen better days, her brown hair pulled back in a messy, practical bun. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at a knot in the wood of the table. She looked small, defeated, exactly how Patton liked her. "Let's get this over with, Arthur," Patton snapped, dropping into the leather chair at the head of the table. "I have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin." Arthur Pendleton, the senior divorce attorney who had represented the Van Doren family for 3 decades, cleared his throat. Arthur was a man who had seen everything: scandals, affairs, hidden assets. But today he seemed unusually tense. He shuffled the stack of documents in front of him, his eyes darting toward Sherry and then back to Patton. "Of course, Mr. Van Doren," Arthur said, his voice grave. "We are here to finalize the dissolution of marriage between Patton Theodore Van Doren and Sherry Van Doren." Patton drummed his fingers on the table. "Right. The prenup is ironclad, Arthur. We established that 4 years ago. She came in with 0, she leaves with 0. But," Patton sighed, adopting a tone of benevolence he didn't feel, "because I am a gentleman, and because she did manage the household staff adequately, I'm prepared to offer a settlement." Sherry didn't look up. She didn't blink. She just sat there, a statue of mediocrity. Patton slid a check across the table. It was for $50,000. "This is for you, Sherry," Patton said, his voice dropping an octave, the tone he used when closing a deal with a difficult contractor. "It's enough to get an apartment in, I don't know, Queens. Maybe finish that nursing degree you were talking about when I found you." Arthur wiggled in his seat. "Mr. Van Doren, perhaps we should review the asset disclosures before we—" "There's nothing to disclose, Arthur." Patton laughed, a short, sharp sound. "I own the apartment. I own the Hamptons estate. I own the cars. Sherry owns—" "What? Her cat? A collection of paperback novels?" He looked at his wife. "Take the check, Sherry. Don't make this difficult. My associates, are waiting." Sherry finally moved. She reached out, her fingers pale and slender, and placed her hand over the check. She didn't pick it up. She slid it back across the mahogany surface until it rested in front of Patton. "I don't want your money, Patton," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was no tremor in it. It was the steady, flat tone of someone who had done their grieving a long time ago. Patton blinked. "Excuse me?" "I don't want the 50,000, she repeated. "I don't want the apartment. I don't want alimony. I just want the divorce." Patton stared at the rejected check, then up at his wife. For a second, he was confused. Then, the absurdity of it hit him. He started to chuckle. The chuckle grew into a laugh, a loud, genuine belly laugh that filled the sterile room. He slapped the table. You want nothing?" Patton gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh, this is rich. This is classic Sherry. What is this? Pride?" She smelled of vanilla and old rain. She smelled of vanilla and old rain, a scent he used to find comforting, but now found suffocatingly plain. "Let me explain reality to you, sweetheart," Patton sneered. "You were a barista when I met you. You were wiping tables and serving lattes to people who actually matter. I picked you up. I polished you. I gave you a life people kill for. And now you think you can just walk away with nothing and survive?" "I'll survive," Sherry said, finally meeting his eyes. Her eyes were green, usually warm, but today they were like hardened emeralds, cold, unbreakable. "You'll starve," Patton corrected her, "or you'll come crawling back in 6 months when you realize that the world doesn't care about nice people. It cares about power, it cares about names, and you, my dear, have neither." He turned to Arthur, throwing his hands up theatrically. "Draw it up, Arthur. If she wants to play the martyr, let her. Give her exactly what she asked for. 0. Kneel. Void." Patton walked back to his chair and sat down, checking his reflection in his phone screen again. "God, this is easier than I thought. I thought she'd fight for the jagged little piece of the Hamptons house. Write it up. Sherry Van Doren requests no assets, no spousal support, and waives all rights to future claims. Put it in bold." Sherry reached into her tote bag, a canvas bag, not the Birkin he had bought her for Christmas, which she refused to carry, and pulled out a blue folder. "I've actually prepared the paperwork myself," Sherry said, "to save time." Patton snorted. You prepared legal documents. Did you download a template from the library computer?" "Something like that," she said. She slid the document toward Arthur. "It's a standard dissolution. Irreconcilable differences. No contest. I just need you to countersign, Patton." Arthur Pendleton took the document. He looked annoyed. He was a partner at a top-tier firm. Reading a legal Zoom document prepared by a barista-turned-housewife was beneath him. He adjusted his spectacles and looked down at the paper with a sigh of professional condescension. "Mrs. Van Doren," Arthur began, his tone patronizing, "while I admire your initiative, these documents need to be thoroughly vetted to ensure—" Arthur's voice trailed off. The room went silent. Patton was busy texting Chantel. "Done. Leaving in 5. He didn't notice the silence at first, but it stretched on. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. "Arthur?" Patton asked, not looking up. "Just sign the damn thing so I can leave." Arthur didn't answer. Patton looked up. Arthur Pendleton was pale. Not just pale. He looked as if he had just seen a ghost or a gun. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were locked on the bottom of the last page of the document Sherry had handed him. A bead of sweat rolled down the lawyer's temple, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Arthur?" Patton asked, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. What is it? Did she misspell her own name? Arthur swallowed hard. He looked up at Sherry, gazing at her with a mixture of awe and absolute terror. He stood up slowly, his knees shaking slightly. "Mr. Van Doren," Arthur croaked. His voice was unrecognizable. "What?" Patton snapped. You need to read this," Arthur said, sliding the paper toward Patton with a trembling hand. "The signature." Patton rolled his eyes. "Oh, for God's sake." He snatched the paper from the table. "What is the drama?" "She signed it Sherry Van." Patton stopped. The text at the bottom of the page was crisp and clear. It wasn't handwritten scrawl. It was a formal legal seal, embossed into the paper, accompanied by a signature in elegant, practiced cursive. It did not say Sherry Van Doren. It did not say Sherry Smith. The signature read Sherry Elizabeth Wellington Halloway. Below the signature, in smaller print, was a title: Sole heiress and majority shareholder, the Halloway Trust and Wellington Global Holdings. Patton stared at the words. They didn't make sense. It was like looking at a math equation that resulted in a color. "Halloway," Patton whispered. The name hit him like a physical blow to the gut. Halloway. Everyone in finance knew the name. The Halloway family didn't just have money. They were money. They were old industrial steel money, railroad money, shipping money. They were the kind of family that didn't appear on rich lists because they paid people to keep them off rich lists. Wellington Global Holdings was the parent company of half the Fortune 500. Including, Patton realized with a sudden, sickening lurch of his stomach, the bank that held the loans for his real estate empire. He looked up at Sherry. She hadn't changed. She was still sitting there in her grey cardigan. But suddenly, the cardigan didn't look cheap. It looked like the kind of understated, I don't need to impress you camouflage that billionaires wore when they wanted to be invisible. "Sherry?" Patton's voice cracked. "What is this?" "That is my name," she said simply. "No," Patton stammered, standing up, the paper crinkling in his fist. "No, you're Sherry Miller, from Ohio. Your parents were school teachers. You worked at a coffee shop." "My parents were school teachers," Sherry said calmly. "They taught at the private boarding school in Switzerland, where my grandfather sent them to keep me grounded. And I worked at the coffee shop because I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen for me, Patton. Not for the Halloway Trust." She stood up. She wasn't small anymore. She seemed to fill the room. "I spent my whole life wondering if people loved me or my portfolio," she continued, her voice cool and crisp, shedding the meek persona she had worn for 4 years. "So when I met you, and you didn't know who I was, I thought I'd found it. I thought you loved the girl who spilled oat milk on your tie." She walked around the table, approaching him. Patton took a step back, hitting the window. "But you didn't love me, did you, Patton?" she asked. "You loved having a pet. You loved having someone to look down on, someone to control." "Sherry, baby, wait," Patton said, a frantic smile plastering itself onto his face. His mind was racing. Wellington Global. If she was a Halloway, she was worth billions. This is a lot to process. Why didn't you tell me? We could have been a power couple. We can still— "Arthur," Sherry said, cutting Patton off. She turned her gaze to the lawyer. Arthur snapped to attention. "Yes, Ms. Halloway. Mrs. Van Doren. Ma'am?" "The document," she said. "Please read the clause regarding separate property." Arthur scrambled to find the page. He adjusted his glasses, sweat dripping onto the legal pad. "Clause 4, Section B," Arthur read, his voice shaking. "Each party shall retain sole ownership of all assets brought into the marriage, and all assets derived from the use of said assets." "Good," Sherry said. "Now, Arthur, do you recall the angel investment loan Patton received 3 years ago to save his firm from bankruptcy? The $10 million from the anonymous holding company in the Caymans?" Patton froze. That loan had saved his life. He had leveraged everything he owned against it. He thought it was some shady cartel money or a desperate hedge fund. "Yes," Arthur whispered. The Phoenix Group." "The Phoenix Group is a subsidiary of the Holloway Trust," Sherry said. She looked at Patton. "It was my money, Patton. I authorized the loan. I wanted to see if you would succeed, if you were given a chance. I wanted to believe in you." Patton's knees gave way. He slumped into his chair. "And," Sherry continued, relentless, "do you recall the collateral you put up for that loan?" Patton couldn't speak. He knew. He had put up everything. His company stock, the Hamptons house, his apartment, his future earnings. "The loan was callable upon divorce," Sherry said softly. "It's in the fine print." She reached across the table and plucked the check for $50,000 from Patton's slack fingers. She tore it in half, then in quarters, dropping the confetti onto the mahogany table. "I told you I wanted nothing from you, Patton," Sherry said. "And I meant it. I don't want your money. But I am taking back my money. And since you leveraged your entire existence against it..." She leaned in close, whispering into his ear. "It turns out you're the one who is leaving with nothing." She straightened up and picked up her canvas bag. "Arthur," she said, "send the default notice to his office by 5. I believe he has a dinner reservation he won't be able to pay for." Sherry turned and walked toward the heavy oak doors. "Sherry!" Patton screamed, finding his voice. He scrambled up, knocking his chair over. "Sherry, you can't do this! We're married! You love me!" She paused at the door, her hand on the brass handle. She didn't look back. "I loved the man I thought you were," she said. "But he never existed. Goodbye, Patton." The door clicked shut. Patton Van Doren was left alone in the silent boardroom with a terrified lawyer and a view of the city he used to own. His phone buzzed. It was Chantel. "Where are you? I'm ordering the lobster." Patton stared at the phone. Then he looked at Arthur. "Arthur," Patton whispered, "fix this." Arthur Pendleton closed the file folder. He stood up and began packing his briefcase. "Mr. Van Doren," Arthur said coldly, "my firm represents the Wellington Group in several other matters. Conflict of interest requires that I resign as your counsel, effective immediately." "What?" Patton gasped. "You can't leave me." "I can," Arthur said, heading for the door, "and I advise you to find a public defender. You're going to need one when the forensic accountants look at how you spent that loan money." Arthur walked out. Patton was truly alone. Patton Van Doren burst out of the heavy oak doors of Pendleton, O'Malley and Associates, and into the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He loosened his tie, gasping for air. The hallway was empty, silent, indifferent to the fact that his life had just been incinerated in a conference room 10 yards away. He pulled out his phone. His fingers were shaking so badly he dropped it on the plush carpet. He swore, snatched it up, and dialed his chief financial officer, Greg. Pick up, you idiot!" Patton hissed, pacing in front of the elevator bank. "Mr. Van Doren?" Greg's voice answered, sounding breathless and panicked. Background noise, shouting, phones ringing, flooded the line. "Greg! Where are you?" Patton barked, trying to regain his composure. "Listen to me. I need you to transfer the liquid reserves from the Cayman account to my personal holding immediately. All of it. Don't ask questions." "Patton, I can't!" Greg shouted over the noise. "What do you mean you can't? I'm the CEO." "You were the CEO, Patton," Greg yelled back. "We just got a writ of execution from a holding company called the Phoenix Group. They called in the bridge loan, the 10 million plus interest." Patton felt the blood drain from his face. "Stall them, Greg. Tell them it's a clerical error. We have 30 days to cure a default." "No, we don't." Greg sounded near tears. "I'm looking at the contract right now. There's a change of circumstance clause. It says the loan is callable immediately upon the filing of any divorce petition by the guarantor. They filed the motion 4 minutes ago, Patton. 4 minutes." The elevator doors dinged open. Patton stumbled inside, pressing the button for the lobby repeatedly. "Greg, listen to me," Patton pleaded, his voice cracking. "Move the operating capital. Just get me enough to fight this." "I can't move anything," Greg screamed. "The accounts are frozen. The SEC is already on the line, asking about commingled funds. And Patton, security is here. They're escorting me out. They say the company is under new management, a receivership appointed by the creditor." "Who is the receiver?" Patton whispered, dread pooling in his stomach. "Some firm called Wellington Holloway Trustees," Greg said. "Patton, what did you do? Who did you cross?" The line went dead. Patton stared at his phone. The screen lit up with a notification from his personal banking app. Account overdrawn. Checking. Minus $12,450. Another notification. Credit limit exceeded. Platinum card suspended. He leaned against the mirrored wall of the elevator, watching his own reflection slide downward as the lift descended. He looked the same as he had 10 minutes ago. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the watch that cost more than a Honda Civic. But it was a costume now. The elevator opened into the lobby. The doorman, a burly man named Eddie, whom Patton had never tipped in 5 years, looked up. "Car's out front, Mr. Van Dorn," Eddie said. But there was no warmth in it. He was looking past Patton at a tow truck backing up to the curb. Patton ran through the revolving doors into the biting February wind. His silver Aston Martin, his pride and joy, was parked in the loading zone. A man in a blue jumpsuit was currently attaching a hook to the front bumper. "Hey!" Patton screamed, sprinting across the sidewalk. "Hey, get away from my car!" The tow truck driver didn't even look up. He kept cranking the winch. "You can't do this!" Patton grabbed the driver's shoulder. "This is a $200,000 vehicle. Unhook it right now!" The driver turned around. He was holding a clipboard. "Patton Van Doren?" "Yes, and I'm going to sue you and your entire pathetic company if you don't. Repossession order," the driver said, shoving the clipboard into Patton's chest. "Authorized by the lien holder, Phoenix Group. You missed the balloon payment, triggered by the default clause." "I didn't miss anything," Patton shrieked. Passers-by were starting to stop and stare. A woman with a stroller slowed down to watch. "Look, buddy," the driver said, spitting on the pavement. "Computer says seize. I seize. You got personal items in there? Grab 'em now. Once it's on the flatbed, it's gone." Patton scrambled to the driver's side door. He yanked the handle. Locked. "Key fob's disabled," the driver said, bored. "Remote lockout." "My laptop is in there," Patton yelled, banging on the window. "My portfolio." "Should have paid your bills," the driver said. He hit a lever, and the Aston Martin groaned as it was hoisted into the air, its sleek silver body hanging like a dead fish. Patton watched it go. He stood on the curb, the wind whipping his tie into his face. He checked his pockets. He had his phone, a wallet with useless credit cards, and $40 in cash. He looked at his watch. 7:15 p.m. Would laugh about this. They would laugh about this. They would figure it out. She loved him for his ambition, not his money. That's what she always told him in bed. He couldn't take a cab. He didn't have enough cash for the cross-town surge pricing. He couldn't take an Uber. His cards were dead. Patten Van Doren, the king of real estate, turned up his collar and began to run. He ran past the luxury boutiques where he used to shop without looking at price tags. He ran past the coffee shops where Sherry used to work. He ran until his lungs burned and his Italian loafers blistered his heels. He had to get to Chantelle. Le Bernardin was a sanctuary of hushed tones, white tablecloths, and the soft clinking of crystal. It was a world where problems didn't exist. Only courses. Chantelle sat at one of the best tables, the one near the private alcove. She was stunning, a vision in a red silk dress that clung to her like a second skin. Her blonde hair was cascading over her shoulders in perfect waves. She was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, looking bored. She had already ordered the Osetra caviar. Patten stumbled into the restaurant entrance. He was sweating profusely. His hair was wind-blown, his face flushed red from the cold and the exertion. The maître d', a man named Henri, who usually greeted Patten with a bow, stepped in front of him, blocking the path to the dining room. "Monsieur Van Doren," Henri said, his voice icy. "We did not expect you." "I have a reservation," Patten panted, trying to smooth his hair. "Table 4, with the lady in red." "Ah, yes," Henri said, not moving. "There is a small matter of the deposit for the private dining. The card on file was declined. Attempted 3 times. Patten flinched. "It's a bank error, Henri." "You know me. I spend 50 grand a year here." "Just put it on my tab. I'll sort it out tomorrow." Henry looked at Patten's shoes, scuffed and wet from the slush outside. He looked at the sweat on his forehead. In the world of high-end service, staff knew the smell of ruin before the person themselves did. "I cannot extend credit tonight, monsieur," Henri said. "Fine." Patten reached into his pocket and pulled out his gold watch. It was a Patek Philippe, worth $80,000. "Take this. Hold it. It's worth more than your car. Just let me sit down." Henry looked at the watch with distaste, but he stepped aside. "I will hold it in the safe. Just this once. But you must settle the bill by the end of the service, or I call the police." Patten nodded frantically and pushed past him. He walked to the table. Chantelle looked up, her blue eyes narrowing, as she took in his dishevelled appearance. "You're late," she said, not offering a greeting. "And you look terrible. Did you run here?" "Chantelle, baby," Patten said, collapsing into the chair opposite her. He reached for her hand across the table. His palms were clammy. It's been a hell of a day. You have no idea." Chantelle pulled her hand away, picking up her flute of champagne. "Did you sign the papers? Is the mouse gone?" "Yes," Patten said, breathless. "Yes, she's gone. But there were complications." Chantelle paused, the glass halfway to her lips. "What kind of complications? Did she want the house?" "I told you, I'm not living in that apartment, Patten. It smells like mediocrity." "No, she didn't want the house," Patten said. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Chantelle, listen to me. Sherry tricked me. She's not who we thought she was." "I don't care who she is," Chantelle said, signaling the waiter for more bread. "I care about when we are going to St. Bart's. You promised me the winter season." "We can't go to St. Bart's," Patten blurted out. Chantelle froze. She set the glass down slowly. The restaurant noise seemed to fade away. "Excuse me," she said. "The money," Patten whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "It's gone, Chantelle, all of it. Sherry, she's a Holloway. She owns the debt on my company. She called the loans. They took the car. They froze the accounts. I have nothing right now, just for a few days. I just need to figure this out." He looked at her with desperate hope. "But we have each other, right? That's what matters. I can rebuild. I'm Patten Van Doren. I just need you to stand by me. Maybe you could speak to your father, just for a bridge loan." Chantal stared at him. For a long moment, her face was a blank mask of beauty. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator spotting a wounded animal. She started to laugh. It was a soft, tinkling laugh, terrifyingly similar to the way Patton had laughed at Sherry only hours before. "My father?" Chantal asked, amused. "Patton, darling, my father is a dentist in New Jersey. He doesn't have a bridge loan for you. He has a mortgage and a Honda." Patton blinked. "But you said he was in oil." "Essential oils," Chantal corrected, picking at a hangnail. "It's a pyramid scheme. He's very high up." She sighed and dabbed her mouth with the linen napkin. "God, this is embarrassing. I really thought you were smarter than this. I thought you had the prenup locked down." "I did," Patton protested. "She outsmarted me. But Chantal, I love you. We can make this work. We can get a small place. Start over." Chantal looked at him with genuine pity. "Patton, look at me. Do I look like a girl who starts over? Do I look like a girl who does small places?" She reached into her purse, the Birkin that Sherry had refused to carry, which Patton had given to Chantal instead, and pulled out her phone. "I was actually going to break up with you tonight anyway," she said, casually, tapping on the screen. "You've been getting boring lately. Too much stress. It's bad for my skin." "Break up?" Patton choked. "But the ring, I bought you the diamond last week." "And I pawned it this morning," Chantal said. "Good thing, too. Sounds like the repo men would have come for that next." She stood up, smoothing her dress. "I ordered the lobster and the wagyu. You should probably eat it quickly before they throw you out." "Chantal, please!" Patton grabbed her wrist. "You can't leave me here. I have no money. How am I supposed to pay for this?" She looked down at his hand on her wrist, as if it were a piece of garbage. "Not my problem," she said. She leaned down and kissed him on the cheek, a cold, dry peck. "Goodbye, Patton. It was fun while the credit limit lasted." She pulled away and walked toward the exit, her hips swaying. As she reached the door, she stopped and turned back to the maitre d'. "Henri," she said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "The gentleman at table 4 is bothering me, and I believe he's indigent. You might want to check his pockets before he leaves." She walked out into the New York night, disappearing into a waiting black SUV that wasn't Patton's. Patton sat alone at the table with the white cloth. The waiter arrived and placed a steaming plate of lobster thermidor in front of him. "Will there be anything else, sir?" the waiter asked. Patton looked at the lobster. He looked at the empty chair where his future was supposed to be. He looked at the other diners, who were studiously ignoring the scene, though he could feel their judgment radiating like heat. He realized then that Sherry hadn't just taken his money. She had taken his shield. She had stripped him of the illusion that made him a man. Without the money, without the name, he was just a guy in a suit he couldn't afford, crying over a lobster he couldn't pay for. He put his head in his hands. Outside the window, snow began to fall, covering the city in white. Somewhere out there, Sherry Halloway was warm, and for the first time in his life, Patton Van Doren was freezing. The sidewalk outside Le Bernardin was slick with a mixture of freezing rain and city grime. Patton Van Doren stood shivering in his bespoke suit, which was now soaked through to the silk lining. He held his arms across his chest, the wind biting through the thin fabric. He had been ejected, not just asked to leave, but physically escorted out by 2 large security guards, after Henri, the maitre d', discovered that Patton's Patek Philippe watch was a high-quality replica, Patton had bought it in Shenzhen years ago to impress clients, assuming no one would ever look closely enough. He had forgotten that Henri was a collector. The humiliation burned hotter than the cold. Passers-by gave him a wide berth. A man in a wetsuit screaming at a closed restaurant door was a common enough sight in New York, usually signaling a mental break or a market crash. Tonight, it was both. He needed to get to the apartment. Even if they changed the locks, the doorman, Gerald, liked him. Gerald would let him in. He just needed a shower, a change of clothes, and his hidden stash of emergency cash in the hollowed-out book in the library. Patton began to walk. The wind whipped his wet hair into his eyes. He trudged block after block, his expensive loafers slipping on the icy pavement. As he turned the corner onto Park Avenue, a sleek black Maybach idled at the curb. It was a monster of a car, long and silent, with tinted windows that reflected the city lights like obsidian. Patton slowed down. He knew that car. He had leased it for the company 2 years ago. It was the CEO's car. His car. Rage flared in his chest. "That's mine!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. He lunged toward the vehicle. "Get out of my car!" He pounded his fist on the rear window. "Open up! I know you're in there, you thieves!" The window didn't shatter. It hummed. Slowly, smoothly, the glass lowered. Patton prepared to scream at the repo man or the bankruptcy trustee. But the words died in his throat. Sitting in the back seat, bathed in the soft glow of the car's interior mood lighting, was Sherry. She was dry. She was warm. She was reading a document on a tablet, a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up at him, not with fear or anger, but with a detached curiosity, as if he were a specimen in a jar. "Sherry," Patton gasped, grabbing the door handle. It was locked. "Sherry, let me in. It's freezing out here. You have to help me." "I don't have to do anything, Patton," she said. Her voice was muffled slightly by the rain, but it cut through the noise of the traffic. "We're married!" Patton cried, water dripping from his nose. "Technically, we are still married until the judge signs the decree. You can't leave your husband on the street." "Technically," Sherry corrected him, "I am the creditor in possession of this vehicle, and you are trespassing on company property." "Stop it with the legal crap!" Patton screamed, slamming his hand on the roof. "Look at me. I'm ruined. Is this what you wanted? To see me beg?" Sherry took off her glasses and folded them slowly. She pressed a button, and the door unlocked with a heavy thunk. "Get in," she said. Patton didn't wait. He scrambled into the back seat, the warmth of the heater hitting him like a physical embrace. He reached for her, but she held up a hand. "Don't touch the upholstery," she said sharply. "You're soaking wet." Patton froze, hovering on the edge of the leather seat. He looked at his wife. She looked different. The grey cardigan was gone. She was wearing a structured navy blazer that looked like it cost more than his first car. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. She looked powerful. "Why, Sherry?" Patton asked, his voice trembling. "Why did you do it this way? You could have just divorced me. You didn't have to burn it all down." "I didn't burn it down, Patton," Sherry said calmly. "You did. You built your house on a foundation of sand and fraud. I just kicked the sand." "Fraud?" Patton scoffed nervously. "Everyone fudges the numbers a little. It's business." "No," Sherry said. "It's felony embezzlement. I've seen the books, Patton, the fake invoices, the shell companies, the payments to building inspectors." Patton went pale. You looked at the books?" "I own the books now," she reminded him. "And I found something very interesting. Do you remember the charity gala we threw last year? The one for the orphanage?" "Yes," Patton said. "We raised $2 million. "And do you remember where that money went?" Sherry asked, her eyes boring into his. Patton looked away. "Administrative costs, overhead. It went to pay off your gambling debts in Atlantic City," Sherry said. "I found the wire transfers." Patton was silent. The only sound was the rhythmic swish-swish of the windshield wipers. "I could have gone to the police immediately," Sherry said, "but I wanted to give you a chance to be honest. Today, at the meeting. If you had just signed the papers with grace, if you had shown 1 ounce of humility, I might have buried the evidence. I might have let you walk away with your reputation intact." She turned to face him fully. "But you laughed," she whispered. "You laughed at me. You told me I was nothing without you. You tried to buy me off with $50,000 of stolen money." "I was angry," Patton pleaded. "I was hurt. I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," Sherry said. "You fell in love with a reflection, Patton. You needed someone small to make yourself feel big. And the moment I stopped being small, you couldn't handle it." She tapped on the partition window separating them from the driver. "Pull over here, James," she said. The car slowed to a crawl and pulled up to the curb. They were in front of a subway station. "Sherry, no," Patton said, panic rising again. "Where are we going?" "I'm going to my hotel," Sherry said. "You are getting out." "But I have nowhere to go." Sherry reached into her purse. She pulled out a single Metro card. "This has $20 on it," she said, holding it out. "It's enough to get you to your mother's house in Queens." Patton stared at the card. His mother lived in a cramped walk-up in Astoria. He hadn't visited her in 3 years because he was ashamed of her poverty. "I can't go there," Patton whispered. "She'll ask questions." "Then you better start thinking of answers," Sherry said. She placed the card in his wet hand. "One last thing, Patton," she said, as he opened the door, the cold wind rushing back in. "You asked why I wanted nothing in the divorce." Patton paused, 1 foot on the pavement. "I wanted nothing," Sherry said, "because I didn't want to be an accessory to your crimes. By taking 0 assets, I have plausible deniability. I didn't profit from your fraud." Patton stared at her, the realization hitting him like a truck. She hadn't just outsmarted him financially. She had legally insulated herself from his inevitable prison sentence. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew the whole time." "Goodbye, Patton," Sherry said. She pressed the button. The door slid shut, sealing him out. Patton stood in the rain, clutching a Metro card, as the Maybach merged back into traffic and disappeared into the night. 6 months later, the fluorescent lights of Burgers and Brews, a diner on the outskirts of Jersey City, hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. Patton Van Doren, now wearing a name's tag that read Pete, wiped down the sticky counter with a grey rag. His suit was gone. He wore a grease-stained polo shirt and non-slip shoes. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and unkempt. It had been a brutal 6 months. The fallout had been instantaneous. The day after the confrontation in the rain, the SEC had raided his offices. The forensic accountants from the Holloway Trust had handed over everything to the district attorney. Patton had avoided jail only by pleading guilty to lesser charges and agreeing to a massive restitution plan. He was bankrupt, blacklisted, and on probation for 5 years. He couldn't work in finance. He couldn't work in real estate. He couldn't even leave the state of New Jersey without a parole officer's permission. He scraped a piece of dried gum off the underside of the counter. "Hey, Pete!" the manager, a 19-year-old named Kyle, shouted from the kitchen. "Order up on table 6. Stop daydreaming." "Coming, Kyle," Patton muttered. He picked up the plate of fries and walked to table 6. He kept his head down. He lived in constant fear of being recognized, though without the suit and the arrogance, he was surprisingly invisible. He dropped the fries on the table and turned to leave. "Excuse me," a voice said. I asked for ketchup. Patton froze. He knew that voice. It was a voice that used to advise him on tax shelters and offshore accounts. He turned around slowly. Sitting in the booth, wearing a trench coat and looking older, was Arthur Pendleton. The lawyer looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. But he wasn't eating. He was just sitting there, staring at Patton. "Hello, Patton," Arthur said softly. Patton looked around the diner. It was mostly empty. "Arthur," Patton hissed, "what are you doing here? Are you here to gloat, or to serve me more papers?" "Neither," Arthur said. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit down for a moment. Kyle won't mind. I tipped him $50 to look the other way." Patton hesitated, then slid into the booth. "You ruined me, Arthur. You gave them the files. You were my lawyer. Attorney-client privilege." "Privilege doesn't apply when the lawyer is part of the crime, Patton," Arthur sighed, "or when the lawyer is trying to save his own skin. Sherry gave me a choice. Turn state's witness against you, or go down with the ship. I have grandchildren, Patton. I chose my life." "You're a coward," Patton spat. "Perhaps," Arthur said. "But I'm a free coward. And you, well, you're Pete." Arthur reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick envelope. It was sealed with the Halloway crest. "I came because Sherry asked me to," Arthur said. "She wanted you to have this." Patton stared at the envelope. "What is it? Money? Is she finally feeling guilty?" "Open it," Arthur said. Patton tore open the seal. Inside was a single document. It wasn't a check. It was a deed. He read it. His hands started to shake. It was the deed to his grandmother's house in Queens, the small, run-down row house where he had grown up, the one he had leveraged and lost when he started his first company. He had sold it out from under his own mother to fund his first venture. "She bought it," Patton whispered. "She bought it," Arthur said. "She renovated it. She paid off the back taxes." "Why?" Patton looked up, tears forming in his eyes. "Why would she do this?" "Read the second page," Arthur said. Patton flipped the page. There was a handwritten note from Sherry. "Patton, you spent your whole life trying to run away from who you were. You thought that money and a fake name would make you a king. But you were never a king. You were just a boy from Queens who forgot where he came from. I asked for nothing in the divorce, but that wasn't entirely true. I asked the court for one specific item of sentimental value that had zero market worth. I asked for the family photo albums you left in the attic of the Hamptons house, the ones you told me to burn because they looked too poor. I saved them. They are in the living room of this house. Your mother is living there. I gave her life tenancy. The house is in your name, Patton. But there is a condition. You can't sell it. You can't leverage it. You can only live in it. If you want a roof over your head, you have to go back to Queens. You have to go back to your mother. You have to go back to being Patton, the human being, not Patton Van Doren, the brand. Start over. For real this time. Sherry Patton dropped the letter. He thought about the luxury apartment he had lost. He thought about Chantel, who hadn't called him once. He thought about the cold, lonely room he was renting above a bowling alley. "She gave me the house?" Patton asked, his voice breaking. "She gave you a home," Arthur corrected him. "Something you never gave her." Arthur stood up and buttoned his coat. "Oh, and Patton?" Arthur added, pausing by the edge of the table. "There is one final twist, a detail the DA didn't catch, but Sherry did." "What?" Patton wiped his eyes. "The Phoenix Group, the company that bought your debt and destroyed you?" Arthur smiled, a dry, sad smile. "Sherry didn't start it." Patton frowned. "Then who did?" She signed the papers. She took it over, Arthur said. But the company was originally incorporated 20 years ago. By your father. Patton stopped breathing. His father had left when he was 5. He was a drunk, a nobody. Your father won the lottery in 1998, Arthur said. He didn't tell anyone. He put it all into a trust for you, to be released when you turned 40, or when you hit rock bottom. He wanted to ensure you learned the value of hard work first. Patton felt the room spin. My father was rich? He was, Arthur nodded. Sherry found the dormant trust. She realized that by leveraging your company against the Phoenix Group, you were essentially borrowing from your own future inheritance. When she destroyed you, she was actually stopping you from stealing from yourself. The money she used to pay off your restitution? That was your father's money. She just managed it so you wouldn't blow it on sports cars. Arthur tapped the table. She saved you from yourself, Patton. She broke you down so you could finally be built back up. She was the only person who ever actually loved you. Arthur walked away, the bell on the diner door jingling as he exited into the night. Patton sat alone in the booth. He looked at the deed to the house in Queens. He looked at the greasy diner counter. He wasn't a victim of a vengeful ex-wife. He was a man who had been given a second chance by the ghost of his father and the mercy of the woman he had scorned. "Pete!" Kyle yelled from the kitchen. "Table 4 needs a refill." Patton Van Doren took a deep breath. He picked up the coffee pot. He walked to table 4. "Right away," he said. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a fake. He felt like a man who had a long way to go, but finally knew the way home. And that is the story of how asking for nothing ended up costing one man everything, and yet gave him the only thing that actually mattered. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of life, arrogance is the most expensive luxury of all, and sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones holding all the cards. What do you think? Did Sherry go too far, or did Patton get exactly what he deserved? And what about that twist with his father's trust? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.